Stand by to initiate release sequencer. On my mark. 5.
We're on express elevator to hell. Going down.
2. 1. Mark.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mark, a.k.a. Derringer. Today is Sunday, June 18th, and you are listening to episode 110 of the Instant Action Podcast, your weekly source for Planetside 2 news and information. As always, I'm brought to you by great listeners like you via the Support the Show tab on instantactionpodcast.com. First up this week, it is Father's Day, so I want to wish a happy Father's Day to all the guys out there that play Planetside 2 and also happen to be fathers. I know quite a few of you. I won't go in and name you all because then I will leave out some of my other listeners that I know on accident, and I don't want to do that. So instead, how about a couple Planetside 2 inspired dad jokes? Since I am a father myself, I can make these jokes and feel good about it. So I'm not going to say that I came up with these because I certainly have seen these kicking around. I don't know who came up with these, but a couple Planetside 2 dad jokes. So first off, what Planetside 2 faction makes the best pirates? Well, obviously that would be the TR. Yeah, I know. Hold your applause. Also, why are Planetside 2 pilots always unhappy? Because they get so much flack in-game, obviously. And finally, how many NC does it take to screw in a light bulb? Well, the answer there is none, because only the Vanu seek enlightenment. I feel bad even just telling those jokes. But as a father, I certainly do a hell of a lot worse on my own than those. So hopefully you guys enjoyed those. Moving on, I do want to say congrats to Rachel and Auntie for winning the PlayStation Network cash cards that I gave away about a week or so ago. As I told my PlayStation 4 or Planetside 2 on PS4 folks, I would do a giveaway for you guys, and I did have the two winners chosen and gave them both their cash cards, and I know they both have used them already. So congrats again to Rachel and Auntie for winning those giveaways, and look for the future for more giveaways as always. I still have some Daybreak cash codes that I'm saving for a rainy day, so maybe one of those will be given away in the next month or so. So keep your eyes open for that. So what is actually in store for this week's show, though? Well, first, we do have a PC hotfix to talk about. This brought a slew of little bug fixes as well as a Tengu buff. Then I want to talk about i3 and older Intel CPUs and some of those recent difficulties that those users are experiencing. Next, I want to talk about weapon locks, and finally, the robotics technician implant. So strap in as we hot drop into another episode of the Instant Action Podcast. So first up this week, like I said, let's talk about the June 14th PC hotfix. And in that hotfix, like I said, there were a slew of bug fixes. And honestly, those bug fixes are like all over the board. You get things like killing vehicles are now going to count towards metal credit again. Resto Kit's using the proper icons. They fixed Econom's vehicle bay. It previously was too thin for a mag rider to get through, and that kind of screwed Vanu, who were playing in Econom with mag riders. Detection devices should be tracking enemies again. That was broken for the longest time after the most recent game update. There were some issues with your Carapace implant. If you had it, if you had a second implant slot up, you'd no longer get healing from regeneration. If you had Carapace activated at the same time, they fixed that. They corrected the Ant and Sunder resistance values. They had made a mistake and were making those as if they were the combined arms update resistance values. And they made Ants and Sunders a lot more beefier than they should have been. They've corrected those. They fixed an issue where you couldn't pull Liberators from the VR training area. A big one for my friend Galos, Nightmare rank 5 no longer works on team kills. I know he was going around team killing people left and right to activate Nightmare. In addition to that, we got a couple other little changes here and there. Nothing huge. I guess the Combat Surgeon implant ranks 3, 4, and 5 weren't granting energy on revives. Those have fixed. As well as, a bunch of different little things. The big change within this patch itself, though, or this hotfix itself, though, is the buff that came to the Tengu. And while they felt that aiming down fight sights with the weapon itself is competitive, Hipfire was not performing where they wanted it to be. It was certainly below expectations. So they have buffed the Cone of Fire attributes, which should extend the range at which Hipfire can be used. And also now suppressor values will fall in line with that of other SMGs. Because as I said last week, Iridar's guide said there was really no reason to use the suppressor because it wasn't working as intended. Finally, the default magazine improvement was improved for an additional 2 rounds to give a little bit more forgiveness against higher health targets. So those changes across the board are magazine size increased from 18 to 20, ammo capacity increased from 126 to 140. The Hipfire standing Cone of Fire was 1.75. It's now down to 1. Same with the crouching Cone of Fire. The Hipfire walking Cone of Fire was from 2. It's down to 1.5. Hipfire crouch walking was 1.75. It's down to 1.25. The Hipfire pellet spread was 3.5. It was reduced down to 3. And the Hipfire Cone of Fire bloom was cut in half. It used to be 0.14. It's now 0.07. Now, the hybrid laser, Hipfire, Cone of Fire, and pellet spread reduction, it used to be minus 15%. It is now minus 20%. So certainly a buff to actually using the hybrid laser. The suppressor's velocity reduction was minus 35%. It is down to minus 20%. So again, making it more competitive. And the suppressor's minimum damage range reduction went from minus 20 meters to minus 10 meters. Again, just looking to make the suppressor a much more viable option. I'm still not using the suppressor on my Tengu, but I will say that I am all for all these various changes that the Tengu, or these buffs that the Tengu got. Now, I said it on last week's show, and I'll say it again on this week's show. I really like the Tengu. Now, is it the best SMG out there? No. But I'm finding the fact that it shoots pellets and kind of acts like a friggin' shotgun is making me win 1v1 fights on the roofs. Well, let me take a step back and say that with the Tengu, I'm playing it on my Terran Republic character for the most part, because when I play Vanu, I'm working through my Lasher to try and Araxium the Lasher X2 8 Anniversary Edition variant. I already have the regular Lasher Araxium, so just trying to get both those Araxiumed. And on my new Conglomerate character, I'm still trying to finish off the Carbine Directive to unlock the Directive Carbine on that. So the only character or the only place I'm not kind of pigeonholed into working towards a directive or something like that is on my Terran Republic character. So I am using the NSX Tengu pretty much exclusively on Terran Republic in a light assault role, and I'm really enjoying how it works up on rooftops and things like that. A number of bases on Indar where I'm having a field day up there, winning 1v1 fights that I was losing in the past, because I'm not going to lie, I'm not the best player out there. I mean, most people know that at this point, but playing around with the Tengu, I'm really enjoying it. It's very forgiving, because even if you land a couple of those pellets, it's still doing a ton of damage. It really feels like a submachine gun shotgun. And again, like I said, winning a lot of 1v1 fights up on the roofs, getting some decent kills, because as it always is, people never look up when they're running across my field of vision. So again, really enjoying the Tengu right now. If you have not trialed it, I highly recommend you go and play around with it as a trial. Like I said, for me, it's working amazingly well as a light assault. In Biolabs too, I'm loving it inside Biolabs. I haven't been too excited about many of the NSX weapons up to this point. I mean, the Masamune is really good. I use that all the time. I guess that's probably the exception to the rule. But some of the other ones, like the Tonto, it works well. It's only okay. I haven't used the Yumi at all. I'm afraid of it because of the way it works and its mechanic. Some of the other ones I really haven't used. Like I haven't used any of the knives, things like that. I really haven't used the Tomoe too much. I've used the Naginata. But aside from the Masamune, I really think that right now the Tengu is my favorite of all the NSX weapons. And I'm going to see how far it can take me every time I play Terran Republic and jump around as a light assault. So I think that we'll probably see another buff to it before everything is said and done, even though I think it's really powerful in its current state. And even so powerful that I had somebody raging at me in Yell Chat because I had killed them with the Tengu. I think he had been killed by a lot of Tengus that night, and I was just the straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak. If you're watching this on YouTube this week, you'll see that the majority of my YouTube play is going to be NSX Tengu related, so I hope you guys enjoy that. Moving on from the Tengu, the last thing with this patch is they said that there are some known issues. Cold Tier is showing in the map continent rotation. They're aware of it, and they are still addressing it to get it out of there. Obviously, you can't get to it if you're above BR15, so you certainly don't need to worry about it, but it does sort of clog up the amount of continents that you do see. And makes me wonder if now's the time to start pushing towards battle islands again. I mean, we're at the stage in the game now where I think Cold Tier could probably stand alone, and we could do some sort of Cold Tier alert, and certainly we know that they have the other unfinished battle island at this point. As we know, it's the Nexus. I've done stuff in the past on the Nexus and things like that. And I mean, we still have the quote from Matt Higbee when he was there saying that they have already been working on another one called Desolation that we certainly haven't seen anything. If they do have the Nexus kind of in a not finished state, and they have Cold Tier, and maybe they have this other one called Desolation sitting in the background, maybe we are going to see some sort of battle islands come out in the future, especially if Cold Tier is making it onto the map rotation. Of course, I could be reading absolutely too much into that, and if that's the case, we're not going to see that anytime soon. Again, that is the June 14th PC hotfix in a nutshell. Like I said, the majority of the stuff in this patch was bug fixes as well as a Tengu buff. And with that, let's move on to our next topic this week. So something that cropped up this past week was some issues with players that are using the Intel's i3 or some of their older CPUs. They were having issues in-game where they'd play for a little while, and then they'd get an absolute kicked from the server and were unable to play. And this happened, probably 15 minutes in, maybe less than that. And really what it came down to is if you were using any of the i3 chips, any of the old Q chips, like a 6600, a 9550, or one of the Q4000 chips. Yeah, these are old chips, I know that. Even people with like the i3 2100, someone had an i3 4130 they were having it with. Really issues with not being able to play Planetside 2 because of this chip. And what was discovered and what was quoted by Josh Kriegshauser was that they had upgraded to a newer version of some third-party software that uses a CPU instruction that is only available on newer CPUs, and this is CPUs higher than an i3 CPU. So even though the processors that I just mentioned, those i3s, are below their minimum spec, they are addressing any issues with those particular chips. And as you're listening to this, if you are someone who used or has an i3 or one of those older Q chips, know that as of this point in the game, it is working again and they have corrected it. So if you were one of the people that were affected by it, and you got frustrated with it and you logged out and you haven't come back to the game because of it, again, know that this has been corrected at this point and you are now able to get in and play the game. Now, it turns out what the issue ultimately was that when they made that upgrade, it was an upgrade to SSE 4.2. And if you have one of those older chips, it only supports SSE 4.1. And this affects all those Core 2 Duos, those Core 2 Quad, again, all those older ones and some of those some of those older i3s. If you have one of the i3 6600s, I believe, you are not running into that issue. It's just some of those older ones at that point that were running into that issue. So again, if you stepped away from the game because of this, because of the crashing or not being able to play the game, it has been fixed and you are able to get back into the game and play it again. So just use that as a PSA at this point, and we'll move on to topic number 3 this week. All right, third up this week is something about weapons locked. So as you guys know, if you're playing the game and you shoot a whole bunch of friendlies, you get the pop-up saying that stop doing it or you're going to get weapon locked. That apparently has changed recently. And there is no longer weapon locking in the game itself. Now, instead of getting weapon locked, you get kicked from the game altogether and you kind of now get to enjoy a little bit of a ban from the game itself rather than an actual weapons lock, which would allow you to go around and do some other things, like fly people somewhere in a galaxy or something like that. Now, if you do lock yourself out, again, no longer a weapons lock, you're going to get disconnected from the game, and you are going to be met with a slight ban for no one's really sure how long the ban lasts at this point. This is just something that we kind of got dropped on us with no real information about it. I know a lot of players are unhappy with this because especially like Sunderer drivers, harasser drivers in particular are ones that I've seen the most complaints coming from because a lot of those harasser drivers are going around and accidentally driving over friendly players. It's very easy to do in a harasser. I get it. It's happened to me. I've done it to other people. It just happens. And those players are the most afraid that they're going to be affected by something like this. People who are trying to Araxium the Lasher, like me, are also worried about it. I can tell you that in Araxiuming the first Lasher, that I never once got weapons locked. So as long as you know what you're doing, you're not going to get weapons locked, or in this case, disconnected from the server and given a ban for a little while for using it. But I do think that if you're a harasser driver, that this could be something that affects you negatively for something that you're doing accidentally. Other than that, am I dissatisfied or unhappy that they've decided to put a ban like this in? Honestly, no. Because I think if this is something that is going to disincentivize team killing, or someone who purposely switches characters to team kill people for something, I don't really have a problem with this. I can honestly say that I've probably been weapon locked once or twice in my lifetime of playing playing Planetside 2. I used to get weapons locked all the time in the original Planetside, but that's because I would be standing with a pounder max and just shelling a doorway nonstop. I went through a ton of weapons locks in the original Planetside, but I have had very few weapon locks within Planetside 2 itself, and I think even for a bad player or even a good player, I don't think it really matters. I don't think that if you know what you're doing, that you're going to get weapons locked. Now, do I think that, like I said before, harasser drivers might be in a little bit of a different boat? Sure. Do I also think that someone using orbital strikes might also be in a different boat? Sure, I agree with that also. And to that effect, we did get a note from Daybreak Games saying that they have removed orbital strike kills from the ban calculation shortly thereafter because they found that it was difficult to regulate. So you shouldn't have to worry about killing teammates with an orbital strike at this point. In fact, they say kill as many of your teammates as possible with it now. So certainly that's not going to affect you. But again, I'm not too concerned with weapons locking turning into a mini ban, especially because I'm sure it's not a super long ban, even though no one's really come out and tested it at this point, or there's no real confirmation about how long you're going to be banned from the game, rather than being weapons locked. I wouldn't be surprised if it was the same amount of time, a 15-minute ban, which is similar to what you were getting when you were weapons locked at times. Again, I don't really have a problem with this, and I know that there's going to be a very vocal group of listeners who vehemently disagree with me on this, but that's fine. We're able to disagree about something like this. I think it's an interesting tactic taken by Daybreak Games, and if it helps to kick out all the people who are purposely team killing others, then I'm all for things like this being brought into the game itself. I'd love to hear from anybody who's gotten banned because of this. I'd love to know how long of a ban you got stuck with, and things like that. Again, I use this more as a PSA more than anything else to be careful not to get yourself in a state where you normally would have been weapon locked, because going forward, you're actually going to get banned. All right, fourth and final topic this week is probably a little bit of a retraction as compared to last week's show. And this is the robotics technician implant that I want to talk about at this point. And before I get into it, I want to say that I am extremely disappointed with the current state of the robotics technician implant. Last week, like I said, I was very excited about robotics technician because that's the one implant I wanted to get on my NC character, and I did get it. Unfortunately, I only had enough ISO 4 to upgrade it to rank 3, and not all the way to rank 5 like I wanted, because I was under the impression that rank 5 would allow you to have either 2 Spitfires or 2 hard light barriers in play at the same time. Little did I know, and apparently a lot of people didn't know this as well, that at some point before it went live, Daybreak Games changed the rank 5 of robotics technician to, instead of being able to put 2 Spitfires or 2 hard light barriers, that instead that any non-mine deployables you own within 15 meters, in addition to having the 25% resistance to incoming damage, they're also going to repair themselves for 25 health per second, even while under fire. Now, great, but that's not what I wanted, and that's not what I was under the impression that I would be receiving as soon as it reaches rank 5. So this is a retraction as to what I said last week's show. I was clearly very excited last week. Now I am very much less than excited about robotics technician. I have no desire at this point to raise it above rank 3, and I'm a little pissed off that I spent over 1,000 ISO just to increase it to rank 3, and now I'm pretty pissed off about it, to be honest. And it's my fault for not realizing that had been changed. In my defense, the patch notes did not indicate that it had been changed. I don't recall ever seeing any PTS patch notes saying it had been changed. And if someone like me, who does news about Planetside 2 each week, had no idea that this change went live, then Daybreak Games did a terrible job communicating this, and it just leads additionally to me being pissed off that this change did not make it... that this change was not communicated to us. As it stands right now, there's really no reason at all for me to recommend any engineer to be using your robotics technician. I mean, it's that 25 health per second is really nothing. It's not going to keep your Spitfire alive that much longer than it currently already is. Heck, it might keep your standard turrets alive a little bit longer, and maybe your hard light barriers are going to last forever. But again, you have to be within 15 meters of it for it to even happen. And as you know, with hard light barriers and spitties, it's set it and forget it. You can run as far away from you want, and it will continue to do its duty. Again, I'm so disappointed in the change to robotics technician that I really don't know what else to say about it. I can't wait to unlock some other class-specific ones that I'll use more than I'll use this one. I'm I'm at a loss for words because I'm so disappointed in that particular change. Now, people have said that it's a rendering issue, and there are already tons of stuff being rendered all at the same time, and adding additional Spitfires or hard light barriers to the game is going to impact people's frames per second. And to that, I just say bullshit. It's just bring me back my robotics technician rank 5. Allow me to put 2 Spitfires and 2 hard light barriers, and let's call it a day.
Housekeeping. Housekeeping.
Come back later, please.
Housekeeping.
Not now.
Housekeeping.
Go away.
I coming anyway?
All right, I do have some housekeeping after the angry robotics technician segment. First up, I did get an email from Nano Technician this week, and Nano Technician sent me another YouTube video from the Pink Fairies. And in his video, he shows one of the members, Free Walker, that's FR33 Walker, of the Pink Fairies, putting a mag rider on top of a galaxy and then flying that mag rider onto the pad of a biolab and absolutely wreaking havoc. Vanu Nano Technician calls that game science, and it's absolutely hilarious. I'm loving every video I get from these Pink Fairy guys because they show them doing just some crazy stuff with the physics in the game and the vehicles in the game itself. I will include a link to this video in this week's show notes as well so that people can check this one out. I love everything they do. Please send me more videos like this because I'm loving it. I did also get an email from 19th Doctor, who I haven't heard from in a while, and he wrote, Hey Derringer, last spring I had to take a break from Planetside 2 because my laptop just couldn't do it anymore. I've been out of the game for more than a year now, but finally got a new laptop and am able to run this game again. I stuck with the Instant Action podcast for the first few months of my forced retirement, but after that I didn't try to keep up. I logged in last week for the first time in over a year and felt almost as confused and disoriented as I did when I was a little baby BR1. There are some changes that I've discovered for myself through trial and error. I guess the construction system finally came into being, and apparently I can run 2 implants at a time, and a number of bases have been changed around. The first one I really noticed was TI alloys. Then when you mentioned in this week's episode that subterranean nanite analysis was removed from the game entirely, I realized there were things I was missing. The last major update I recall before I took a break from the game was the addition of the Sunderer Cloak. So my question to you, O walking encyclopedia of Planetside knowledge, are there changes and updates to the game from the past year that may not be immediately visible, but that I should be aware of? First off, 19th Doctor, welcome back to Planetside 2, and thanks for coming back to the show. I understand that if you're gone from a while and dropped the podcast, but I'm happy that you came back and started listening again. There are a ton of changes and updates that may not be immediately visible. Since you said you left around last spring, and after the Sunday Cloak came into being, I did a little rundown from my show notes about some of the bigger things that happened within the months themselves. So I'm going to start in last April, that's April 2016, and move forward and just kind of give you some brief things that came into the game during those times. So first off, in April of 2016, construction finally made itself into the game, and at the same time, Indar got a huge revamp, and we're talking just about every base on the continent of Indar got revamped in one way or another. Like, they raised the heights of some of the mesas and made the flight ceiling different. Like I said, tons of changes. Just about every base on Indar got a change. In June, hives were added to victory point conditions. I know that's something that not everybody is aware of. So now the number of hives that you own and also the amount of cordium that you've harvested are two things that add to victory points for victory conditions. That might not be something that you're aware of. In July of 2016, there was a huge air-to-air balance patch that hit the game. If you do any flying at all, I suggest you go back and listen to episode 61 where I had Hader on, and Hader is one of the people I respect the most when it comes to air-to-air changes. I would heavily suggest going back and listening to that episode. You'll hear a lot of stuff there. In September, they pushed through a lot of new player updates, so you get a lot of attachments and things like that now as a new player. They also introduced the starter loadouts to the game itself. They changed a lot of those around, so if you look at your character screen, you're going to see that all your different loadouts, unless you had renamed them, have some new changes to them, and they all come with default weapons built into them. Next, in October of 2016, they introduced Battle Eye to the game. Battle Eye is a new anti-cheat detection software. They also added Vehicle Direct Deploy to the game. That's where on the redeploy screen, you can click on a base, and then if you look on your screen where you can choose the class that you play, there's also something, it's like a circle with a line through it. If you click on that, you can choose a vehicle to spawn in at that base, an instant spawn. Be careful when spawning things like Valkyries, though, because a lot of those still spawn upside down. That's a continuous bug in the game that hasn't been fixed. They also introduced the first NSX weapon. That's the NSX Naginata. That's the LMG. The NSX series are something designed by or really pushed through by Rel. And I know that they are all weapons that were designed by one of the players who does stuff for the Player Studio. Also, they introduced the ability to spawn in Valkyries as a standard option, not something that you have to sort out anymore. November, they added the NSX Tomoe and also the Amaterasu. Again, they've really been pushing this NSX line. In December, they removed max charge from the game. That's kind of a big one. They also added some changes to med kits where you can't just chain use them. You'll have to use the med kit and the resto kit, and then it will automatically default back to your primary weapon. They also added some hipfire changes for carbines, especially when you're airborne firing them, making it a lot easier for light assaults to shoot while they're in the air. They also added the Masamune, the Fujin, and also the Rocklet rifle. Masamune is one of my favorite new additions to the game. In January of this year, they allowed infiltrators to start using battle rifles. They also did a pretty big shotgun balance at that time, and a big change that still people are smarting over today. Thermal optics on vehicles no longer highlight infantry in the game. It only highlights enemy vehicles. So that's something, if you drive around a lot, you're probably going to have to go and change a lot of your optics. In February, we got the introduction of the next NSX weapon, the Tonto. That's the carbine. I've been using that one a lot. In March, they added orbital strikes to the game. If you play Planetside 1, obviously you know what an orbital strike is. If not, an orbital strike is exactly what you think it is. It is tied specifically to construction, though. You do have to build it through construction and actually use it as part of construction. They also added the implant changes in March. Like you said, you can now have 2 implants, but they also redid the entire implant system itself. They also added the Engineer's Hard Light Barrier in March, something that I've been using a lot. In April, they added the NSX Yumi. That's the most recent NSX weapon after the Tengu, which I talked about this week, to the game itself. That one's usable by combat medics. And in May, I'm not going to say June because you said you listened to last week's show, but May, they added some directive-based implant awards, so it's worth going through and seeing if you've got some lower-level directives that you can finish out, because a lot of those are going to reward you a couple implants. And they also added the ISO 4 recycler, where you can spend ISO 4 and get a implant, which has a decent option or a decent probability of getting one of the harder to receive implants in the game itself. So that's kind of from when you quit to where we are today in a nutshell. Some of the stuff is obviously pretty obvious. Some of the other things like the air-to-air balance changes, Battle Eye, vehicle direct deploy, you might not be aware of, so it's worth just doing a quick run-through, and I hope that this helps you out. And with that, that's going to be it for this week's show. So how can you get in touch with me or the show itself? As always, visit my website, www.instantactionpodcast.com. Send me an email, just like Nanotechnician and 19th Doctor did. My email address is instantactionshow@gmail.com. You can always call me and leave me a voicemail at 347-486-4772. That's 347-4VM4PS2. The show's Twitter account is at InstActPodcast. Follow that for all the news that I push out. And also my personal Twitter account is at The Derringer. So in closing, if you've enjoyed the show, please leave me a review on your podcast listening avenue of choice, whether it's iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, or anywhere else. Also, feel free to tell your friends and outfit mates about the show. And finally, thanks for listening, and keep spamming that Join Combat, formerly known as Instant Action button.